In the heart of the American West, where the sun bleeds across the jagged peaks and the wind whispers tales of hardship and hope, lies San Miguel, a town forged in the crucible of ambition and grit. It's a place where fortunes are won and lost with the turn of a card, and where the line between law and lawlessness blurs with the setting sun. Sheriff Granger, a man as weathered and unyielding as the landscape he calls home, has sworn to protect this town. He's seen the best and worst of humanity ride through its dusty streets, and he knows that peace is a fragile thing, easily shattered by greed, vengeance, or the ghosts of the past. In Sheriff Granger, shadows over San Miguel, the echoes of a previous conflict stir, bringing a storm of danger and reckoning to the town's doorstep. A mysterious stranger arrives, bearing secrets in a shadowed past, while a notorious outlaw gang, led by the ruthless figure known only as the Widow, seeks to settle old scores. As the lines between friend and foe become blurred, Granger must confront not only the external threats, but also the internal demons that haunt his own past. With the fate of San Miguel hanging in the balance, he'll be forced to make impossible choices, testing the limits of his courage, his loyalty, and his very soul. Prepare to be swept away by a tale of grit, redemption, and the enduring spirit of the West, where the price of justice is often paid in dust and blood, and where the shadows of the past can either consume you or forge you anew. Welcome to San Miguel. Chapter 1. The Stranger at Sundown. The sun was a molten coin sinking behind the jagged hills, casting long, bruised shadows over San Miguel. The air shimmered with the last heat of the day, and the scent of sagebrush and distant wood smoke drifted on the breeze. Sheriff Granger rode slowly down Main Street, his boots caked with dust, his eyes sharp beneath the brim of his sweat-stained hat. The town was quieter than it had been in months. The gold dust fever had passed, leaving behind a handful of prospectors, a few broken dreams, and a lingering sense of unease that clung to the wooden storefronts like a stubborn cobweb. He nodded to Mrs. Alvarez, who was sweeping her porch with a determined energy, her gray hair pulled back in a tight bun. The bristles of her broom scratched against the boards, a steady rhythm in the hush of evening. "Evening, Sheriff," she called, her voice warm but wary, her eyes flicking up and down the street as if expecting trouble to come rolling in with the tumbleweeds. "Evening, ma'am. All quiet today?" Granger asked, his voice low and even, the kind of voice that could calm a spooked horse. She nodded, but her eyes flicked toward the saloon, where the yellow lamplight spilled out onto the street, and the muffled sound of piano keys drifted through the swinging doors. "Mostly, but there's a man in there. Strange sort. Been asking about you." Granger's hand instinctively rested on his holster, the worn leather familiar beneath his fingers. "Thank you, Mrs. Alvarez. I'll look into it." He tied his mare outside the saloon, the horse's flanks still warm from the day's ride, and stepped inside. The familiar creak of the floorboards and the low hum of conversation greeted him. The air was thick with the smell of whiskey, sweat, and old wood. The piano player paused, his fingers hovering above the keys, and all eyes turned to the sheriff. At the bar sat a man in a battered duster, his hat pulled low, a glass of whiskey untouched before him. The lamplight caught the edge of his jaw, stubbled and sharp, and the set of his shoulders spoke of a man who'd spent too many nights sleeping rough. Granger approached, boots echoing on the wooden floor. "You looking for me, stranger?" His voice was calm, but there was steel beneath it. The man didn't look up. "Depends. You Sheriff Granger?" "That's right. And you are?" The stranger finally lifted his head, revealing sharp gray eyes that seemed to take in everything at once. The bar, the exits, the faces watching from the shadows. His face was lean, weathered, and marked by a week's worth of stubble. "Name's Cole Maddox. I'm not here for trouble, Sheriff. Just need a place to rest." Granger studied him, noting the way Maddox's hand hovered near his belt, the tension in his jaw. San Miguel's a peaceful town. Folks here don't take kindly to troublemakers. Maddox's lips twitched in a humorless smile. "I'm not looking for trouble, just trying to outrun it." Granger's gaze lingered on the untouched whiskey. "You planning on drinking that or just staring it down?" Maddox shrugged. Finally taking a slow sip, he grimaced as if the burn of the liquor was a reminder of something he'd rather forget. Old habits die hard, I guess. Before Granger could press further, a shout erupted from outside, a raw, panicked sound that cut through the saloon's hush. Fire! Jenkins' barn's ablaze! Granger was out the door in a heartbeat, Maddox right behind him. The townsfolk were already gathering in panic, their faces lit by the orange glow of flames roaring from the old barn at the edge of town. The heat hit Granger like a slap, the air thick with the acrid tang of burning hay and wood. "Form a line!" Granger barked, his voice carrying over the chaos. "Buckets, now, move!" Maddox didn't hesitate. He joined the line, hauling water with surprising strength and urgency, his duster flapping as he ran. Sweat poured down Granger's face as he fought the blaze, the smoke stinging his eyes and filling his lungs. The world shrank to the crackle of fire, the shouts of neighbors, the slap of water against flame. "Keep it coming!" Granger shouted, his arms aching, his shirt plastered to his back. The fire hissed and spat, but slowly, stubbornly, they beat it back. After what felt like hours, the fire was finally subdued. The barn was a charred skeleton, its beams blackened and twisted, but the rest of the property was saved. The crowd dispersed, murmuring in relief and exhaustion, the adrenaline fading into bone-deep weariness. As Granger wiped soot from his brow, he noticed something nailed to the barn door, a scorched plank with a message scrawled in black soot. "The past never forgets." Maddox's face went pale as he read the words, his jaw tightening. Granger caught the look and pulled him aside, away from the curious eyes of the townsfolk. "You know something about this?" Granger asked, his voice low. Maddox hesitated, glancing around to make sure no one was listening. His hands trembled slightly as he spoke. "It's a warning. For me, and maybe for you, too." Granger's eyes narrowed, the weight of the moment settling on his shoulders. "Who's after you, Maddox?" Maddox's voice was barely above a whisper, rough with regret. "The Black Hat Gang. I thought they were finished, but looks like they're back. And they're coming for us both." Granger's jaw tightened, the old familiar anger rising in his chest. "Then we'd best be ready. In San Miguel, we don't run from trouble. We face it head on." That night, after the last embers had died and the town had settled into uneasy silence, Granger sat on the porch of the sheriff's office watching the stars emerge one by one. The air was cool now, carrying the scent of charred wood and distant rain. Maddox sat beside him, silent, his hat pulled low. The town was quiet, but the air was thick with tension, as if the darkness itself was holding its breath. "You ever think about leaving?" Maddox asked, breaking the silence. His voice was softer now, stripped of bravado. Granger shook his head, gazing out at the darkened street. "This town's my home. I made a promise to protect it, no matter what." Maddox nodded, staring into the darkness. "I used to think I could outrun my past, but it always catches up. No matter how far you ride, it's always there, just behind you." Granger looked at him, seeing the weight the man carried, the scars that didn't show on the skin. Maybe it's time to stop running. Maddox didn't answer, but Granger saw a flicker of hope in his eyes, a fragile thing trembling in the night. Somewhere in the distance, a coyote howled, and the sound echoed through the empty streets, a reminder that the wild was never far away. Granger leaned back, feeling the rough wood of the porch beneath him, the steady presence of Maddox at his side. For a moment, the world was still, balanced on the edge of something new and dangerous. And in that silence, Sheriff Granger made a silent vow. Whatever storm was coming, he would face it, with courage, with grit, and with the unbreakable spirit of San Miguel. Chapter 2. The Black Hat Gang. The morning after the fire dawned gray and restless, the sky bruised with low clouds that threatened rain, but offered only a heavy, pressing stillness. The scent of charred wood still lingered in the air, mixing with the sharp tang of horses and the faint aroma of coffee drifting from the boarding house. San Miguel was on edge. Doors opened a crack, eyes peered out, and every sound seemed sharper, more urgent. Inside the sheriff's office, the mood was tense. Granger sat behind his battered desk, the scorched plank from Jenkins's barn laid out between him and Maddox. The words, "The past never forgets," seemed to pulse in the dim morning light, a brand on the town's memory. Maddox sat hunched, his hat in his hands, knuckles white. Deputy Sam paced the floor, boots thumping a nervous rhythm. Sam was wiry, with a mop of sandy hair and a face that could break into a grin at the drop of a hat, though today his smile was nowhere to be seen. He stopped, glancing at Maddox, his voice tight. "You're sure it's the Black Hat Gang?" Maddox nodded, his jaw clenched. "I rode with them once, years ago. After the law ran us out of Dry Creek, I thought they were finished. But the widow, she's meaner than any man I ever met. She took over after her husband died. She's got a score to settle with the sheriff and with me." Granger leaned back, arms crossed, the chair creaking beneath him. He studied Maddox, searching for any sign of deceit, but found only regret and fear. "What's her real name?" Maddox shook his head, a bitter smile flickering. "Don't know. No one does. She's just the widow. And she's got a long memory. She never forgets a slight, never forgives a betrayal." Sam ran a hand through his hair, exhaling sharply. "How many men does she have?" "Last I saw, a dozen, maybe more. She's got a way of drawing the worst sort, men with nothing to lose." A knock at the door startled them all. Mrs. Alvarez entered, her face pale, her hands wringing her apron. "Sheriff, there's riders on the ridge. Black hats, all of them. They're just watching." Granger stood, grabbing his rifle from the rack. The weight of it was familiar, grounding. "Sam, you're with me. Maddox, stay close." They stepped out into the morning, the town's eyes following them. The air was thick with anticipation, the kind that made your skin prickle and your heart beat a little faster. Granger's boots crunched on the gravel as he led the way to the edge of town, Maddox and Sam flanking him. On the ridge, a dozen riders sat their horses, black hats pulled low, dust swirling around their hooves. At their head was a woman in a black dress and veil, her posture regal and menacing. Even at a distance, her presence was unmistakable, a force of nature, cold and unyielding. She raised a gloved hand, her voice carrying across the open space, sharp as a whip. "Sheriff Granger, you took everything from me. Now I'll take your town." Granger stepped forward, his voice steady. "San Miguel's under my protection. You want a fight? You'll get one." The widow's laugh was low and bitter. "You have until sundown tomorrow to surrender Cole Maddox. If you don't, we'll burn San Miguel to the ground. You know I keep my promises, Sheriff." The riders wheeled their horses and disappeared over the ridge, leaving a trail of dust and dread in their wake. Maddox's face was ashen as they rode back to town, his hands trembling on the reins. "You should give me up, Sheriff. Save your people. I'm not worth this." Granger shook his head, jaw set. "We don't trade lives here. We stand together. That's what makes us different from them." Back in town, Granger called a meeting in the church. The pews filled with townsfolk, miners with soot-stained hands, shopkeepers, mothers clutching their children, old men with rifles across their knees. The stained glass cast colored patterns on their anxious faces. Granger stood at the front, his voice echoing in the high-ceilinged room. "We're up against the Black Hat Gang. They want Maddox, but if we give him up, they'll just keep coming. We stand together, or we fall apart." A murmur ran through the crowd. Fear, anger, uncertainty. Mrs. Alvarez stood, her back straight, her eyes fierce. "We'll fight, Sheriff. This is our home. We won't let them take it." Sam grinned, the old spark returning to his eyes. He clapped Maddox on the back, nearly knocking the wind out of him. "Looks like you're one of us now, friend." Maddox managed a weak smile, his voice rough. "I hope I'm worth it." As the meeting broke up, people lingered, talking in low voices, making plans. Granger watched them, pride and worry warring in his chest. He caught Maddox's eye and nodded, a silent promise passing between them. That night, Granger patrolled the streets, the town bathed in silver moonlight. Every shadow seemed deeper, every sound sharper. He paused outside the saloon, listening to the quiet clink of glasses, the low murmur of voices. He thought of the widow, of the promise she'd made, and felt the weight of responsibility settle heavier on his shoulders. He found Maddox sitting on the steps of the boarding house, staring up at the stars. Granger sat beside him, the wood cool beneath them. "You ever regret it?" Maddox asked quietly. "Becoming sheriff? Staying here?" Granger considered, the night air cool on his face. "Sometimes. But then I remember what it's like to have a place worth fighting for. People worth protecting." Maddox nodded, his voice barely a whisper. "I never had that. Not really. Maybe I don't deserve it." Granger looked at him, seeing the pain and longing in his eyes. "Maybe none of us do, but we fight for it anyway." A breeze stirred, carrying the scent of rain and distant thunder. The town was quiet, but the storm was coming. Granger felt it in his bones, the kind of trouble you couldn't outrun, only face head on. He stood, offering Maddox a hand. "Come on, we've got a long day ahead." Together they walked into the night, the weight of the coming battle pressing down, but the hope of something better flickering in the darkness. Chapter 3: Siege at San Miguel. Dawn broke with a tense, unnatural stillness. The sky was a pale wash of lavender and gold, but the air felt heavy, as if the world itself was holding its breath. The streets of San Miguel, usually alive with the clatter of wagons and the laughter of children, were eerily silent. Only the distant caw of a crow and the soft scrape of boots on dirt broke the hush. Granger, Sam, and Maddox had worked through the night, their hands raw and their eyes gritty with exhaustion. The sheriff's office had become a command post, its desk buried beneath hastily drawn maps, boxes of ammunition, and the battered tin star that Granger wore pinned to his vest. The scent of gun oil and sweat mingled with the lingering smoke from the barn fire, a constant reminder of what was at stake. Outside, the townsfolk moved with grim purpose. Barricades rose from wagons, barrels, and crates, lashed together with rope and hope. Windows were boarded up, the hammering echoing down the empty streets. Rifles and shotguns, some older than their owners, were distributed to anyone willing to fight. Even the women and older children took up arms, their faces set with determination. Maddox crouched in the dust outside the sheriff's office, drawing a map with a stick. The dirt was cool beneath his fingers, the lines sharp and deliberate. "They'll come from the north, through the arroyo," he said, his voice low but steady. "It's the only cover they've got. We can set traps here and here, spike strips, maybe a few surprises." Sam, his sleeves rolled up and his face streaked with grime, nodded. "I'll get the dynamite from the mine. We can rig the arroyo, make it hell for anyone trying to cross." Mrs. Alvarez appeared, her rifle slung over one shoulder, her eyes fierce beneath her gray hair. "I've got a few tricks of my own. My late husband was a trapper. I'll set snares in the alleyways. If they try to flank us, they'll regret it." Granger looked at each of them, pride swelling in his chest. "We're not just defending a town. We're defending each other. Stay low, aim true. Remember, we're fighting for our home." As the sun climbed higher, the townsfolk took their positions. Granger walked the line, offering words of encouragement, a steadying hand on a trembling shoulder, a nod to a nervous father gripping a shotgun. The air was thick with the scent of dust and fear, but also with something stronger, resolve. Maddox found himself standing beside Tommy, a boy of 10 with a slingshot tucked into his belt, and a determined look in his eyes. The rifle in Tommy's hands looked too big for him, but his grip was steady. "You ever fired one of those?" Maddox asked, nodding at the rifle. Tommy shook his head, his voice small but sure. "Pa taught me to hunt rabbits. I can do this." Maddox smiled, ruffling the boy's hair. "Just stay behind cover, all right? And if things get bad, you run to the church. Promise me." Tommy nodded, his jaw set. "I promise." The hours crawled by, the tension mounting with every tick of the clock. The sun beat down, hot and relentless, baking the dirt streets and making the air shimmer. Sweat trickled down Granger's back as he checked the barricades one last time, his heart pounding in his chest. Then at noon, the first shots rang out, a sharp staccato crack that shattered the silence. The Black Hat gang charged from the arroyo, guns blazing, their horses kicking up clouds of dust. The townsfolk returned fire, the air thick with smoke and the acrid tang of gunpowder. The world became a blur of noise and chaos. Shouts, screams, the thunder of hooves, the sharp report of rifles. Granger fired from behind a wagon, shouting orders above the din. "Hold the line! Don't let them through!" His voice was hoarse, but it carried steady and commanding. Sam and a group of miners crouched behind a barricade, their faces grim. At Granger's signal, they detonated the dynamite, sending a section of the arroyo collapsing in a roar of earth and rock. The explosion sent several of the gang's horses rearing and scattering, their riders thrown to the ground. The widow was everywhere, her black veil fluttering in the wind, her pistol flashing as she rode at the head of her gang. Her voice cut through the chaos, cold and merciless. "Bring me Maddox! Burn the town if you have to!" The gang pressed hard, their bullets splintering wood and shattering glass. The townsfolk fought back with everything they had: pitchforks, rifles, even frying pans wielded by determined mothers. The air was thick with the smell of sweat, blood, and fear. In the chaos, Tommy darted from cover, trying to reach his mother on the other side of the street. Maddox saw him and didn't hesitate. He sprinted through the hail of bullets, his heart hammering in his chest, scooping the boy up and diving behind a barrel, just as a bullet struck the ground where Tommy had been. "You all right, kid?" Maddox asked, breathless, his hands shaking. Tommy nodded, eyes wide with shock and gratitude. "Thanks, mister." Maddox hugged him tight for a moment, then pushed him toward the safety of the church. "Stay down. Don't move until it's over." The battle raged for hours, the sun crawling across the sky as if reluctant to witness the carnage below. The townsfolk fought with a desperation born of love and fear, their faces streaked with sweat and soot. The Black Hat Gang pressed again and again, but the traps and barricades held. Every inch of ground was paid for in blood and pain. As dusk fell, the widow called a retreat, her voice echoing through the battered streets. "This isn't over, Granger. I'll be back." Her words hung in the air, a promise and a threat. The townsfolk cheered, exhausted but victorious. Granger helped Maddox to his feet, clapping him on the back, his own hands trembling with relief and adrenaline. "You saved that boy's life. You earned your place here," Granger said, his voice thick with emotion. Maddox looked around at the battered but unbroken town, the people who had stood together against the darkness. For the first time in years, he felt something shift inside him, a sense of belonging, of hope. "Maybe I finally found something worth fighting for," he said softly, the words tasting strange but right on his tongue. The sun slipped below the horizon, painting the sky in shades of fire and ash. The town was battered, but it stood. And as the first stars appeared, Granger knew that whatever came next, they would face it together. Chapter 4. Dust and Redemption. The night after the siege was a hush of exhaustion and relief, the battered town wrapped in a fragile peace. The moon hung low and full, silvering the broken windows and casting long shadows across the empty street. The air was cool, tinged with the scent of gunpowder, scorched wood, and the faint sweetness of wild sage drifting in from the hills. Granger sat on the porch of the sheriff's office, his boots propped on the rail, the old rifle across his lap. He worked a rag over the barrel, hands moving by habit, the rhythm steadying his nerves. His body ached with fatigue, but his mind was restless, replaying the day's violence in flashes, the crack of gunfire, the shouts, the faces of friends and neighbors fighting for their lives. Maddox appeared out of the darkness, his boots scuffing softly on the boards. He carried a bottle of whiskey and 2 tin cups, his silhouette limned by moonlight. He looked different now, less like a drifter, more like a man who'd found a place to stand. "Never thought I'd see the day," Maddox said, settling beside Granger and pouring 2 generous measures. "Me, fighting to save a town instead of robbing it." He handed Granger a cup, the whiskey catching the moonlight, amber and bright. Granger accepted the drink, the warmth of it spreading through his chest. "People can change, Maddox. You proved that today." Maddox stared into his cup, swirling the whiskey. "Maybe. Or maybe I just got tired of running." He took a long swallow, the liquor burning away the last of his fear. Before Granger could reply, a single gunshot shattered the quiet. The sound echoed off the building, sharp and final. Both men were on their feet in an instant, instincts honed by years of danger. In the middle of Main Street, framed by the moon and the flickering lanterns, stood the widow. Her black dress billowed in the wind, her veil torn away to reveal a face carved by grief and rage. In each hand she held a pistol, the barrels glinting coldly. "Granger!" she shouted, her voice raw and wild. "Face me or I'll burn this town to ashes!" The townsfolk, roused by the shot, peered from behind barricades and broken windows, their faces pale and anxious. The world seemed to hold its breath. Granger stepped into the street, holstering his rifle and letting his hand rest on his revolver. The dust swirled around his boots, the silence deep and electric. The widow's eyes blazed with fury and something deeper, loss, betrayal, a pain that had nowhere left to go. "You took my husband, my life. Now I'll take yours." Granger's voice was steady, but there was sorrow in it. "It doesn't have to end this way," she sneered, her lips twisting. "For you, maybe. For me, it ended a long time ago." They faced each other, the street silent except for the wind and the distant creak of a sign swinging on its hinges. Granger's heart pounded, but his hand was steady. He watched her eyes, waiting for the flicker of movement. The widow drew first, her pistols flashing in the moonlight. Granger was faster. His shot struck her right-hand pistol, sending it spinning from her grasp. The second shot went wide, and she staggered, dropping to her knees, the other pistol falling from her hand. Maddox rushed forward, hands raised. "It's over, widow! Let it go!" She glared at him, tears streaming down her face, her voice breaking. "You betrayed us. You betrayed me." Maddox knelt beside her, his voice gentle but firm. "I betrayed myself, but I'm done running. You don't have to carry this hate anymore." She sobbed, the fight draining out of her, shoulders shaking. Granger approached, his own heart heavy, and gently cuffed her wrists. "You'll get a fair trial. That's more than you ever gave anyone, but it's what we do here." As Granger led the widow away, the townsfolk emerged from hiding, their relief palpable. Some wept, others embraced, the tension of the siege finally breaking. Mrs. Alvarez hurried over, her apron streaked with soot, and wrapped Maddox in a fierce hug. "You're a hero, Cole. Don't let anyone tell you different." Tommy ran up, grinning, his face smudged with dirt. "You saved me, mister." Maddox smiled, ruffling the boy's hair, his own eyes shining. "Just doing what's right, kid. That's all any of us can do." The night faded into dawn, the first light painting the town in soft gold. The battered buildings stood as silent witnesses to what had been lost and what had been saved. Granger mounted his horse, the leather creaking beneath him, and looked out over San Miguel as it slowly came back to life. Shopkeepers sweeping their stoops, children chasing each other through the dust, the church bell ringing in the new day. Maddox stood beside him, hands in his pockets, watching the sunrise. The air was cool and clean, the promise of a fresh start hanging between them. "Think you'll stick around?" Granger asked, his voice quiet. Maddox nodded, a small, genuine smile breaking through. "If you'll have me." Granger smiled back, the lines of worry easing from his face. San Miguel's always got room for folks looking for a fresh start. As Granger rode out to patrol the edge of town, he felt a sense of peace settle over him, a peace hard won and all the more precious for it. The shadows had passed, for now. But as long as there was a San Miguel, he'd be there to protect it and the people who called it home.
Thanks for riding along, partner. If you enjoyed this tale from the wild frontier, give us a like and hit that subscribe button. Don't forget to ring the bell so you don't miss the next chapter. Until next time, keep your boots dusty and your aim true.